That one in the middle. Oh, yeah.
What's this?
Oh, no, don't close that. Go back to the one over there. You need to maximize that screen.
Right.
To go full screen.
Is that it?
Yes.
That says exit or something.
It says exit minimized video. Now you can hit the box in the middle and make it full screen.
Right here?
No, all the way at the top. That one. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. It's Larry Walther here.
Good morning.
Yeah. I'm counting heads right now to see who all's here.
So name of a band in it, Counting Heads. No.
There's 3 at the treasurer's office.
I'll read that right now. I'm on the call, but I need to get it fixed later, please.
Kale's here. See Kale?
Oh, yeah.
The press is here as well.
Okay. Good morning, members of the State Board of Finance, guests, and members of the press. Seeing a quorum, I hereby call the meeting of the State Board of Finance to order. Before I get to the agenda, I'd like to recognize our new member of the board, Mr. Brent Morgan. Mr. Morgan is President of Commercial Banking for South Arkansas at Bank OCK, which primarily includes the Greater Little Rock market, Hot Springs, and Texarkana. Brent has over 22 years of banking experience, including 10 years at OZK. A Little Rock native, Brent graduated from Catholic High. graduated from the finance and banking degree and an MBA from the University of Arkansas. Additionally, he is a magna cum laude graduate from the Barrett School of Banking in Memphis. Brent, we thank you for your service and willingness to serve, and we're happy to welcome you to the Board of Finance. Would you like to say anything to the board? Brent? Mr. Morgan? All right, well,
Okay, can everybody hear me now?
yes, we can now, Brent.
Well, sorry about that. Year and a half, and the double mute gets me. But no, very pleased to be here. Excited to be a part of the board. Anxious to get started. Very very much considered it an honor to be asked, and appreciate the nice introduction. And like I said, just very excited to be here, ready to get to work.
Good. Well, thank you. We appreciate you too. Okay. The next item is the adoption of the minutes from our July the 7th, 2021 meeting. The minutes were provided to you via email. Do I hear a motion?
Motion.
Say that again.
Motion to adopt.
Got a motion and a second?
Mr. Chair,
Okay, thank you, Susanna.
actually, Mr. Chairman, I have a correction for the minutes as presented.
Okay, and would you tell me what that correction would be?
Yes, sir. Second page, my second page. The top item, there's a paragraph that begins with Secretary Key noted at the end of the fiscal year, there was an additional 20 million. There are 4 references in the minutes to a dollar amount, but they're not consistent. One has 1 M, 3 have 1 M, and 1 has 2 M's. So just for consistency and to ensure that the minutes are read appropriately, I recommend an amendment to those dollar amounts.
Yeah, it looks like the second one on the next paragraph has MM.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, well, with that so noted, do I have a second for the motion?
Second as approved.
Thank
As
you.
amended.
As amended, that's correct. Any additional comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The next item is a presentation of the investment performance report by Treasurer Milligan. Treasurer Milligan, you are recognized to present your report.
Mr. Chairman, good morning, and thank you so much. And again, Brent, welcome aboard. We look forward to working with you, and again, appreciate your service very much. I want to start out today by telling you how proud I am of and how hard my team.
Could I have your attention, please? If you're not speaking, would you please mute your mic? Someone's coming through. Hello?
Jake is calling.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I'm not sure.
Is it for a retiree?
Thank you. I didn't know. I don't know.
Okay, you're good. Mr. Chairman, I'll continue. As I'd mentioned, I wanted to start out telling everyone how much and how proud I am of how hard the team has worked over the last year. I don't have to tell you how difficult the last year's been for investors. My investment team has been relentless in pursuing opportunities to provide our portfolio with as much cost saving and interest producing opportunities as possible, exceeding even our own internal projections for 2021. Very pleased with the work they were able to accomplish in such an extraordinary year. Our short-term portfolio, which consists of demand and money market accounts, as well as commercial paper, earned roughly $659,000 during the fourth quarter ending June 30. This portfolio's earnings are heavily dependent upon the federal interest rate, which, as you know, has been sitting under 25 basis points for quite some time now. Our long-term portfolio earned about $10.5 million during the fourth quarter. The Federal Open Market Committee is continuing their quantitative easing program weekly in purchases of U.S. Treasuries and mortgage-backed securities, which has kept rates low and asset prices inflated across all sectors of the market. The market's flush with cash as investors wait on rates to rise, and anytime there's an upward fluctuation, bonds are scooped up quickly. This, along with the Fed's continual purchases, has limited the bond supply. Simply put, there just aren't enough bonds for the amount of cash investors have. As you'll see on the purple and yellow portions of the chart, our portfolio saw gains due in part to a return on our investment in Israel bonds. We were also able to reposition some select mortgage-backed securities to more profitable agency bonds. As investors wait on opportunities to present themselves, they, like we, are watching the bond market intently, ready to buy as soon as rates fluctuate higher. This is how we've been operating my entire administration, and we're well prepared to make those purchases when it's advantageous to the Treasury. Our total revenue for the fourth quarter was $11.16 million, bringing our total for the fiscal year to $35.4 million. And as I said earlier, this was exceeding even our own internal projections. Moreover, we were able to earn more money than we did in FY 2015. Interest rates were similar, as you'll see on slide 5. Through our continual monitoring of the bond market and taking advantage of opportunities where we can, we've been able to substantially increase earnings since 2015. Not only that, but we've grown the portfolio from a size of $3.5 billion to nearly $5 billion during my tenure. We're setting up a solid foundation on which treasurers can build upon and by which taxpayers can rest assured they're getting the most out of their hard-earned money. The next slide is a brief snapshot of our portfolio allocation as of June 30, 2021, the end of the fourth quarter and fiscal year. You'll see the percentages of our portfolio broken down by the various investment categories that we participate in. I'd like to turn now and let the board know about our new senior investment manager. Last month, we brought on Steve Pulley of Conway to work within our investment division. Steve brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to the team, and we're excited. Well, that's not Steve, but we're excited to have him on board. In addition, in keeping with my policy of having multiple sets of eyes on the work that we do for the state. I'll conclude here and open the door for any questions if anybody has any. Thank you.
So do we have any questions from the floor? Okay, hearing no questions, then I would entertain a motion to accept the report.
So moved. So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, good. The next item is a discussion of the rules before the Arkansas Legislative Council. For this discussion, I recognize Grant Wallace, Chief Deputy Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And briefly, just to update the board and remind you all of kind of where we are in this process, we had a set of rules that was sent before ALC and has kind of been over there since last September-ish. And at this point, once we were completed with our consultants' review and their latest work, they recommended that we take a more holistic look at our rules that govern the investing in State Board of Finance. So with that, we have reached out to Federated Hermes to help us engage in that effort. They are actually on the call today. You were sent a brief memorandum that kind of gave a 100,000-foot view before this meeting this morning. But before we turn it over to Federated and their team, I would like to seek a motion from the board to pull back the rules that would empower DFA and the Treasurer's Office to request ALC return those rules to us so that we can engage in a more holistic review of them and then take them back before the board and ALC to go through the APA process.
So move.
Second. Mr. Wallace, I do have a quick question, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Any anticipated time frame around that review or the next steps?
So hopefully we can have the review done this fall, and ideally we would be able to present something back to the board for your consideration in November. That would give us the ability early part of next year to have them through the legislature, and we can start fully implementing them and getting to work on that January, February at the latest.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have a motion and a second. Are there any additional questions of Mr. Wallace? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
I think, was that an aye or not an opposed? Okay, thank you.
So Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, I would like to introduce Amy Michelson and her colleague, Dave, I'm sorry, I don't have your last name in front of me, Friedman. And to give them the ability just to introduce themselves and explain to the board the process that they're engaging and how they're going to bring to us some best practices to look at and review for your consideration.
Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. My name is Amy Michelson and I'm Executive Vice President with Federated Hermes. I've been with the company for 40 years and I am responsible for our institutional business. And a big part of that business is our work with state treasuries. And so for many years now, we have been a fiduciary partner to state treasuries. And I came to know Treasurer Milligan and the team there, Grant and others, when they took office. And we've developed a collegial relationship. And I was asked to take a look at the Arkansas state statute and the policies that derive from that statute. Now, given the background that I mentioned to you, we do a lot of work in this space wherein we take a look at, can the money at hand be managed to best practices? Is the statute sufficiently broad? And does the policy optimize the terms of the statute? And we take a look at that because, as you may realize, all around the country, statutes and policies that derive from them are in different states of being current. And one of the easiest and simple things to do, separate and apart from legislative work, to change code is to take a look at the policy and make sure that it is as current as it can possibly be. So that was the preliminary exercise we did here. And as a fiduciary partner to states, as I say, we look for best practices. We look to see, is the risk that is being taken to produce returns logical risk? Or is it in some ways illogical because Perhaps the policy could be updated to reflect more contemporary financial instruments. Does the policy allow for full diversification? And what we often find when we work with state treasuries is that there is in fact room to enhance returns and actually lower risk and take more logical risk. So that's what we've done here. And I have worked with David Freeman, who's going to address you here momentarily on many, many projects in the public sector. David is a partner at Arnold and Porter. They have offices in Washington, D.C. And David has a national footprint of great renown, really chipping away at impediments that have impacted the ability for various entities in the public sector to invest as effectively as possible. And his name is behind many of the innovations that have come down, enabling the public sector to have a more fulsome set of standards. So David and I collaborate often, you might say, and this memorandum that you were provided, that he wrote to me, embodies many ideas that could be implemented in your policy today, separate and apart from any legislative endeavor you may choose to undertake in the future. And I think this is a very poignant time to be considering such ideas. And after all, ideas are free, right? We're just giving you food for thought, and you'll have a chance, obviously, to think all of this through and work with the state treasury on these notions. But, we're in an environment of pervasively low interest rates. The market is tumultuous. There's tremendous pressure on the short end of the yield curve, pushing rates down even further. There's some scarcity of commercial paper. There's a convergence of issues like we've never seen before. And so it's very important that investment policies have the depth and breadth they need to have to, yes, control risk, but also afford appropriate opportunity. So if we may, we'd like to briefly walk you through this memorandum at a high level and let you see for yourself what could be entertained for the Arkansas Treasury to use in management of assets. So I guess, without further ado, I'd like for David to address this, since this is his body of work, and time permitting, of course, we can vet questions and have discussion. And we'll be very succinct with the ideas, in the spirit the best stories are told succinctly. So with that said, David, please.
Thank you, Amy, and good morning, Mr. Chairman, Treasurer Milligan, and members of the board. We've been, as Amy mentioned, we've been working with Federated for many years on these types of issues for a number of states. And we've gone through your guidelines and with the investment teams, looked at areas that your statute allows that could be permitted if the board chooses to add them to your guidelines. And there's actually quite a bit there. There is under the statute the authority of the state to invest in corporate obligations that are rated BBB or higher by 2 national rating agencies. And that's actually a pretty broad mandate, but it is subject to the board having guidelines that say, and here's how you do it. So if you want to go there on a more broad basis, you would update the guidelines as the board to do that. But this picks up a number of areas. So one of the investments that the Treasurer's Office is much interested in is a range of asset-backed securities. Those are all permitted if they're corporate obligations, either by the issuer or by the guarantor. And many of these things have a guarantor letter credit, not issued by a corporation, if they have 2 BBB ratings or higher, which most of them, perhaps all of them do. So that's an area of potential expansion. That's quite a broad area. A second area, if you chose to go there, are bank CDs. Banks are virtually all corporations, and the large ones are investment grade rated by multiple agencies. Currently, your guidelines look to having collateral for that under a different statute. And we view those as co-equal ways to do it. If you don't have the investment rating, you can use the collateral If you do have the investment rating, you shouldn't need the collateral under the statute, but the guidelines currently just contemplate the collateralized version. And why this is relevant is that's a very, very large market. These things are highly liquid. And if you look at what's allowed under the guidelines, which include commercial paper or notes issued by those same banks, if those banks were to fail, which are not collateralized, by the way, if those banks were to fail in a receivership, the deposits take first ahead of those notes. So you're actually better off investing in deposits, whether or not collateralized, than issued notes by the same banks. You come ahead in the receivership. So that's one of our areas to look at as a potential expansion. Also on the wish list are SEC Rule 144A securities and Reg D private placement securities. This is a special class of privately offered securities that institutional investors invest in. The SEC just amended their rules last fall to allow state and local governments to be investors in there. And this is now more than half of the bond market in terms of dollars and in terms of names that are being issued. So that is an area that's open to you. The statutes would allow you to do that. The guidelines are a little ambiguous, but you may want to true that up to make it clear that that's a permitted investment. And that's an area that many of the states have been wanting to do for years, and now the SEC is letting you. And so that's something to look at. Also on the wish list are state, county, and municipal obligations, general obligation bonds. Those are all permitted by the statute. So that's permitted. Revenue bonds, to the extent you have a corporate issue and they're rated investment quality, are also permitted by the statute. Another item on the wish list are supranational. This would be like the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank. They issue a lot of bonds into the market. They're typically bought by banks. Those are permitted investments if the issuer is a corporation, which they all are, and they're rated investment quality. All of this under this authority to invest in investment quality debt instruments of a corporate obligor. The other thing we would suggest is in the past, the guidelines that the board's adopted have looked at kind of category by category limits on each of these things. So, 5% in this bucket and 10% in that bucket. The statute actually provides for the modern portfolio theory, or sometimes called the prudent investor approach, which is an approach where you look at the qualities of the portfolio as a whole. You look at its duration, you look at its maximum maturity, rather than looking at each particular position in there. Obviously, you have per counterparty limits, so you're not got too much exposure to any one particular issuer. But by going with what the prudent investor rule, you look at the overall characteristics of the portfolio to set items like liquidity and maturity and duration and that sort of thing. And we would suggest that, and many states have moved in that direction. The statute moved in that direction a few years back. And it's, would be a good thing to put into the guidelines when you're setting the limits on these various types of corporate debt obligations. And, that's in a nutshell, kind of the bulk of these items. Amy, anything to add to that?
Sorry, it took me a moment to unmute. That is the larger essence of the piece. These items in aggregate can be very material to you. It may not seem that way. I mean, when one manages very conservative money like you are charged to manage, let's face it, it's not about taking big risks, shooting the lights out, so to say. It's about taking effective incremental risk and taking it wisely. So in addition to what Dave mentioned, you have some idiosyncrasies in your investment policy that are dated. Like for instance, with respect to commercial paper, there is a limit there that the commercial paper must be within a maturity of 180 days or less. In today's market, that's very ineffective. It does not let you take full use of the credit risk presented by the securities that you're looking to purchase. And the only reason I can conjecture that that would be there is because when commercial paper first came to market, it was issued at 180 days. So that's a legacy item. And I just call that out because I think it's a really good example of the many other things that we can look at beneath the scope that Dave laid out today. That in aggregate, if you were to consider these changes, you could essentially lower the risk of your portfolio and enhance its return. Now, we're not here to give you legal advice. We can't do that. You have to make your own determinations, of course. But we do work with many states, and it gives us a vantage point on what others' challenges have been and how they've been solved and the best practices that emerge. So it's in that spirit that we've come to you today, and we hope you take another look at the paper and talk with your Treasury colleagues, and we're available for future conversations if that's appropriate. And that's it, Grant. That's all we had, unless there were questions.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah,
And Mr. Chairman, thank you for indulging us in that. And that section's done.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
This is Eric Munson. I'm all about the lowering the risk and enhancing returns, and agree with your analysis of the market and how it is out there. But I think this is needed. But I had a couple of questions. In your opinion, how will this affect, or will it affect, Arkansas banks, Arkansas institutions, community banks from getting the opportunity to compete for some of these funds?
The banks, you may, sir, be referring to the institutional CDs that we referenced in the piece. I think that's probably, where you're coming from with your question. These securities, using them does not negate any programs that you have with your local banks. The largest institutions, banking institutions that issue commercial paper, also issue these depository instruments. And they actually, in the hierarchy of payment, let's just say, for the sake of discussion, in the event of default, they actually rate higher. And so with these instruments, you're not looking to collateralization, but rather you are looking to the credit worthiness of the bank that issued the instrument, just like you would if you were buying that bank's commercial paper. So in most cases, you would already be dealing with those banks on a commercial paper side. This would just allow you to buy the depository instruments as well. And when we look at the yield curve at the short end of the market, those are the instruments that are yielding the highest. And they are with the most sound institutions. So that's why we think it's a valid idea to consider. But it doesn't negate work that you do with your local bank.
Okay. And again, we just recently had this information. We've not had a lot of time to digest all this.
Sure.
How does your company, how do you get your fees? How are you compensated for your advice?
I am not charging for any advice. We are good industry colleagues with the Arkansas State Treasury. I would hope that at some point the Treasury may consider to use some of our investment vehicles, but there's no obligation to do that. We're just truly industry partners, on a mission to seek best practices.
Okay, and how many other states do you work with?
We work with a total of 37 states on one level or another. Yes, either this type of.
Yeah. Good
Pardon me?
So this is good information. It's just a lot to digest, for me in such a short time. So
it certainly is, and they are. I think they're worthy decisions, but they have to be made after a complete understanding, and that's why these things take dialogue. And I think the treasurer and his team really just wanted to socialize these ideas today and see where you all come out on it and see what you think is best for yourselves.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you, Amy. I'm sorry to hold us up. Go ahead, Mr.
No,
Chairman.
you're welcome. You're welcome.
Grant, could you tell us what your timetable is for further evaluation and recommendation back to the board with regard to this, these issues?
Yes, sir. So we would be looking at probably the November meeting to bring back some recommendations, some thoughts for the board to consider, and hopefully having those available to take to ALC in January, hopefully final action between January and February.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of Amy or David? I guess hearing none, then we'll move on with the agenda. The next item is the quarterly motions for the second quarter of fiscal year 2022. It's October the 1st, 2021 through December the 31st, 2021. These motions are included in the documents that were distributed. As chairman of the Board of Finance, I make a motion to the board that no funds are available for deposit into the State Board of Finance Certificate of Deposit Program. And may I have a second? Hello?
Second.
All right, we have a second. And any questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. As chairman of the Board of Finance, I make a motion, the board direct the treasurer of the state to purchase warrants for the succeeding quarter, October the 1st, 2021 through December the 31st, 2021, pursuant to Act 1088 of 2013, and to keep reasonable amounts in demand deposit accounts and money markets during the next quarter for the transaction of the day-to-day activities. May I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We're at the point where we have, once a year we do annual motions, and the next item is the annual motions before the board. These motions were also included in the documents distributed via email. I make a motion to approve the record-keeping systems of the treasurer of the state with the accounts recorded using the cash basis of accounting for daily transactions. Adjusting entries shall be made at each fiscal year end to properly report the operating results of the treasurer of the state on the actuarial basis of accounting to comply with generally accepted accounting principles. That's GAAP. May I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a quick question.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Is this in any way, since I'm new to the board, is this in any way a change from previous years?
Not at all.
Thank you, sir.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I make a motion to approve the record keeping and reporting requirements of the treasurer of state to include at the minimum the following reports: ledger balance and activity on a daily and monthly basis, fund transactions by type, daily and fiscal year to date, checks charged off detail by line item, daily and fiscal year end date to date, safekeeping inventory on a daily basis, trust fund certificates of deposit on a daily basis, collateral sufficiency daily, demand account balances daily, money market balances daily and monthly, return on investment monthly and year to date. And these two are the same as we do each year. May I have a second, please?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. I make a motion to approve the current collateralization policy of the treasurer of the state. That was attachment A. May I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. I make a motion to approve the code of ethics for the members of the Board of Finance and the code of ethics and criminal background checks for the current employees of the Treasurer of the State. Those were attachments B and C. May I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Members, I'd like for you to sign the last page of the Code of Ethics for the board that you received, and I would like for you to return it via email to Alderman Sampson, if you would, please. The
I-
next,
Mr.
beg pardon?
Mr.
Yes,
This is Auditor Lee. Do you, since we've signed this already and you have it on file, is there a reason we have to keep signing it?
I think we're supposed to sign it annually.
Oh, all right.
Okay, so the next item is the compliance officer, chief compliance officer report, and I recognize Alderman Sampson to give her report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can everyone hear me? This is my first time at the office. Okay, good, okay. So over the past few months, my main focus has been to complete the closing book for the comprehensive annual financial report for the State Board of Finance, which reports the state's activities and balances for each fiscal year. The statistical and last portion of these reports is due at the end of this week. Part of this audit requires a risk assessment, which attempts to mitigate risk going forward. The assessment reviews include cash flow needs, which would be our ability to pay warrants for the state. It goes over internal controls and oversight, and any new regulatory requirements or legislation that would affect the Treasury. I'm also going to continue my education on internal control and risk assessment in the next few months. I plan to take a course in September with the Governmental Financial Officers Association on internal control in a government setting. And this will help me further evaluate the components of internal control and how to detect and report risk within the office to you all. And with that, I'll take any questions if anybody has any.
Any questions? If not, I'll make a motion, we accept Ms. Sampson's report. Do I may have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. The next item is the Employee Benefit Division contract renewal for Colonial Life and Health Advantage. I recognize Jake Bleed, EBD Administrator, for that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. We have two contracts for your consideration. These are being brought to the Board of Finance pursuant to Act 1004, which of course transferred the responsibilities of the Employee Benefits Division Board over to the State Board of Finance. Both of these contracts are one-year extensions that are being brought to the board. They will allow us to continue operations of the Employee Benefits Division into calendar 2022. The intent of this is to maintain operations until a more permanent governance structure can be put into place, which I think the legislature is working on right now. Both contracts, and I want to be clear on this, do raise the rates that the employee benefits division would be paying for the services being provided. The first is the Colonial Life Insurance Program. Colonial Life provides life insurance products to state and public school employees. It's a somewhat complicated relationship in that the state provides a $10,000 life insurance policy for state employees. That is the cost that the state pays. And in addition, state employees and public school employees can purchase additional coverage through Colonial Life through the contract that we've negotiated with them. This is a contract that we've had in place for several years. This is the first time they have had an opportunity to seek a rate increase. They had presented something before the board a couple of years ago. It was not approved at that time. COVID has come along, and the costs incurred as a result of providing this policy are significant. The amount that they are seeking as an increase for the state would be about $70,000. So the amount that the state would pay would rise from about $920,000 annually to about $990,000 annually. As a result of this increase, that is to provide the $10,000 life insurance policy. These funds would be paid out of our FICA savings account, which is a separate account from the accounts we use to cover rates. So they will have no impact on the rates that the health insurance rates that employees must pay. With that, I'll answer any questions that the board might have.
I have a question.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
go ahead.
All right, Jake, what is that a composite rate across the board on everyone, or is it age rated?
So
Sure.
the 10% rate increase that they're seeking across the board is for all their different lines of business, but it varies on the age, basic benefit, the child, the expanded basic, the supplemental, the different products that they offer.
I was referring to the 10,000 the state's paying.
That is for the basic 10,000 rate. That's moving from 26 to 28 cents per $1,000 of coverage.
Okay, thank you. That's what I needed to know.
Any more questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
FICA savings account, could you elaborate on that? What's the balance of that? What other things do you use this FICA savings account for?
So we can get you the balance on that. It is several $1 million. This is something that over the years has been used for different purposes. This is a great question, Andrea, and it's something that we're working on, looking at how that fund has been used in the past. The statute does, I think state code lays out how it can be used, and we can get that code section for you. But right now it's being used to provide some of the other benefits that the state provides to employees, including the life insurance policies.
Huh. Okay. That's it's a pot of money that is allowed to be used for things that, after all the discussions of pots of money for EBD benefits, I don't remember hearing about this one. So curious.
So if there aren't any more questions, I can move on to the Health Advantage contract. The second contract being brought.
Jake, can I get a motion? I'd like to get a motion to approve your recommendation for the Colonial Life first. We'll do them separately.
Yes.
This is Eric. I make a motion to approve Colonial Life.
Okay, and a second, please.
Second.
Any more discussion?
I need clarification on that motion. Is the motion to approve that we renew the contract, or does the motion also include how we're going to pay for that renewal?
The motion is to renew the contract and compensate. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman, if y'all want clarification.
Jake, it is just, I assume we were just approving the renewal of the contract.
Sure. Our intention, though, was to pay for the contract out of the existing, through the existing process, which is the FICA savings. If we wanted to pay for the coverage through another source, it would have to come out of either funds to be identified at some other time, or perhaps the trust funds, which we use for health insurance, but I don't think we could commingle those funds.
Okay, so we are.
The request that we've brought is to extend the contract at the requested rate and to pay for those funds out of the FICA savings account.
All right. So that is the motion we have before us. Do I have a second for that motion? Did I have a second for that motion?
Yes, sir. Ms. Marshall.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Okay, Jake, would you?
So the second contract is the contract. Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
The Health Advantage contract is the primary contract that the Employee Benefit Division health insurance policies run through. This is a contract that we have had in place for many years now with the state. It is the primary third-party administrator, TPA. We access the network of relationships and contractual agreements that they have with almost every healthcare provider in the state, as well as their claims administration. This was a contract which was bid out through an RFP process in 2018. It's a very successful RFP. They bundled a number of different services together. Blue Cross was the lowest bidder in that contract, and since that date, they have been paid an amount of about $20.55 per member per month. So that's $20 that we spend for every member of the health insurance plan for both the state and the public school side. If you think about the number of people we have in the plan, which is about 160,000, and you multiply that by 12 months of the year, this ends up being about a $40 million contract. So it's a major contract for us. I think it's a big contract for Blue Cross. Blue Cross had been operating on the $20.55 PMPM basis for 3 years now. That's what they bid at. They initially came and asked for an increase of up to $23.16, which was this increase of about 13%. We've worked with them since that point to reduce that rate down to $22.51. We think that that's a good reduction in their original request. We've had some very good and frank conversations with Blue Cross. They're actually on the call today about the future of that contract, where it's winning, where we see it as succeeding, and where we think we can improve. Overall, at the request that's before the board today, we would be moving from $20.55 per member per month to $22.51. It's about a $3.7 million increase across the plan, which splits out as about a $1.4 million increase for state employees and $2.3 million increase for public school employees. This would not have an impact on rates going into 22. It would not have a direct impact on rates at any point, but it will be additional costs that would be paid out of the trust funds for the public school and the state employees. The contract also covers the Milliman actuarial firm, as well as the employee assistance program, which is a program we provide services to employees, counseling and whatnot.
Does that conclude your presentation, Mr.
Yes, I would like to open it up for questions.
One question I have is, is this the last year of the contract, and will this be something that will be put out for proposals, RFPs, an RFP sometime this coming year?
So this is the fourth year of the contract, and the way that state contracts are normally structured, if you win the RFP, you have that contract for 3 years. After that, you can avail or potentially seek 1-year extensions up to a maximum of 7 years for the total contract. The intent of bringing this to the board today is to continue operations for this contract through next year, so that the next governing body or the permanent governance structure for the Employee Benefits Division can ask precisely that question. What is the state of the contract? Do we want to put it out for an RFP? Do we want to continue it in its current form? Or do we want to look at the bundled nature of it and make some decisions there? One of the realities that we faced in putting this together is that if we did not want to go this direction, if we wanted to seek a different company or a different bid, it would be a very complicated and time-consuming RFP to put together. This would be a difficult contract to organize and put together. That's not to say we shouldn't do it, but given that we are rolling into open enrollment coming up in October, and that the new contract would begin January 1, I'm not sure that we have the available time right now to seek that as an option.
Thank you. Any additional questions?
Yes. So talk to me about trust funds. This is the first I'm hearing about a trust fund. Could you tell me what it is? What's our balance? What it's been used for?
So those are the main funds that we use to pay claims out of. So we have separate funds for public school employees and state employees. Those are funds that we really operate those plans out of. When people enroll in insurance, those are the funds that they pay, that their premiums go into. Those are the funds that payments from the school districts go into. And then those are the funds that we use, that we lean on to pay out of. Those are the balances that were presented to the board through all the Milliman presentations. I'm sorry, a trust fund may not be a new, but I might have used the wrong term, but that's the funds that we operate both of those plans out of.
And you're thinking we can absorb, I mean, we kind of jumped through a lot of hoops this year. You're thinking we can absorb a $3.7 million increase?
So I'm not happy about that. And I think that Blue Cross is aware of that. We've had some pretty frank conversations, like I said, about the nature of the increase. As I mentioned, they had originally proposed a larger increase. One thing to keep in mind, and this is something that I think is helpful for me in understanding and putting this request into context. If you go back before we did the RFP back in 2018 and you look at what the rates the state was paying, for the 2016 year, for example, on basically the same contract, we were paying $26 PMPM for the premium plan and $24.10 for fewer services. We're getting more services under the bundled contract. So even though we are going up to $22.51, which is a significant increase, we're still well below the rates we were paying as a state 5 years ago.
And I appreciate that answer. And it sounds like it's a good deal. I'm going back to all the meetings we had where we were trying to fit in 2 and 3 and 11 million. And I'm just wondering, I mean, this is a significant increase. And I'm just wondering how we absorb it.
So the way that we would absorb it is by making smart and careful decisions in management and doing the exact sorts of things that we work through with the board. How we manage that beyond into 23 and 24, I think is going to be one of the big challenges. But we face significant costs separate and apart from this that we have to manage as well. So this will be one of the many obstacles that we face going forward. I know that's probably not the answer you were looking for, but when we look at medical costs, when we look at inflation, and we look at the things that we have facing us, this is one of the challenges. But compared to some of the other costs that we face, this is not, in my opinion, one of the biggest challenges. Keep in mind also, we've had actuaries from Milliman as well as the legislature review the costs we pay, both administratively and then also on a medical side. And that's a reflection of the contract that Blue Cross has. And they all uniformly come across and say that our medical costs are comparatively low when you compare it to surrounding states. That the contract that we have and the relationships that it makes available to us allow us to operate on a fairly low cost basis.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question or a comment.
Please go ahead.
I know that's a bundled package. One of the things I would like to point out is that a biggest piece of that bundle is the network discounts. We discussed that somewhat in a few of the meetings when we were discussing benefits and so forth. The network discounts that Blue Cross Blue Shield get in the state of Arkansas is pretty monstrous in comparison to the other carriers. Just wanted to make that note.
Yeah, they would be reflected in the rate that we're receiving from them.
Yeah, so what will happen is if you look at the finances, you can see a billed rate, which is the rate that the providers start at, and then you can see the amount that the network actually paid. And the two are almost not comparable. The reduction is significant.
Are there any more questions?
I have a quick question, Mr. Chairman.
Please go ahead.
Jake, I know you all would not bring us anything that wasn't an available action item for us, but just for my knowledge, we have the authority to be able to do a 1-year extension, even though it has previously been an RFP. I'm assuming that's all baked into our authority.
Yeah, the way that the state procurement law is set up, if you win the RFP and you throw that low bid out there, you have to live with that low bid for 3 years. So you can't just win a contract by lowballing it and then turn right around and ask for an increase. But at the end of that 3 years, you have the right to request and work through potential increases, which is where we're at now.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
And the Board of Finance, I'm sorry, the Board of Finance under Act 1004 does have that authority. With the board's approval today, we will then take these to the legislator, both the Colonial Life and the Health Advantage contract, to the Arkansas Legislative Council next week.
Thank you, Jay.
I have another question, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
You mentioned, Jake, that this had been vetted through the legislature. What actual committee or group vetted it?
Vetted the contract? It would have gone through the review subcommittee.
No, not the contract. Just a few minutes ago, you were talking about vetting the benefits we were receiving, and you said it's been discussed. And I was just wondering if there's a unique subcommittee now of the legislature that's looking directly at our payouts.
So the Arkansas Legislative Council's executive subcommittee has hired Siegel, a consultant, to come in and present information on changes to the plan, what we can do to improve. As part of that process, Siegel presented last month kind of top to bottom review of what are we doing good, what are we doing bad, where are we strong, where are we weak, and that was part of that analysis.
Okay, and that was the group you were talking about. Okay, thank you.
Good. Okay. Any additional questions?
This is
If
Eric
not-
Hudson. I do, again, on these issues, I think we have to have good faith too. I mean, the cost of everything's going up, and I know Alder Lee asked a lot of good questions and others here, and not nickel. I think, if you read the letter and the materials that Mr. Bleed and his team has tried to get the best deal possible. I hope Jay could reiterate that for what we're being presented here, and we're depending on you and your staff to, these renewals to negotiate this and get the best deal possible. And in faith, I'm very good with this, and I'll make a motion to approve if the chairman of the committee will accept.
Thank you, Mr. Munson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any additional questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Who was that?
Andrea?
Okay, thank you.
Treasurer Milligan.
Okay, we had two opposed. All right. Is there any additional business to come before the Board of Finance today? Oh, that's what we just did.
No, that was the.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
What?
So among the subcommittees of the old Employee Benefits Division, which now under Act 1004 report to the Board of Finance, the Drug Utilization and Evaluation Committee of the board met. They have made decisions regarding the drugs that we cover. The DUEC is one of the kind of more innovative things that I think we do at EBD. We utilize the resources of the UAMS College of Pharmacy to help make evidence-based decisions on what we cover and what we don't cover. Those of you who are involved in healthcare probably realize just how innovative and aggressive the medical industry can be in coming up with new ways to treat our problems. We all benefit from that, the COVID vaccine being a good example. But we have a lot of new drugs that are unproven. A lot of requests are made for the plan to cover those drugs. So we have a committee that's really created to look at the medical evidence, to look at the studies, and make decisions on new drugs that come out and whether or not they do warrant coverage. Do they actually work? Are they effective? And should we cover them as a plan? That's what the DUEC does. Their report has been provided, and we have members of the EBRX, which is the company out of UAMS, which helps us with this. They are also on the call and can answer any questions.
Are there
We
any-
need the board's approval of the DUEC report.
Are there any questions with regard to the Drug Utilization Evaluation Committee report?
Can you tell me what cover with PA means? What's the acronym PA?
PA is prior approval, prior
Thank
authorization. So it just means that they call and confirm with EBRX that it's an appropriate use for the drug.
Any more questions? If not, I'd hear a motion for the approval.
I'll make the motion. Keith Konechny.
Okay, thank you. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any additional questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Now, may I ask if there's any additional business to come before the committee? And Jake, I apologize. I got ahead of myself a little while ago. Any more business? Seeing no other business to come before the Board of Finance today, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank y'all.